A Chat at the Mall by Blue_Obsidian. Chapter 4 Camino Ward. So, Deku, care to explain yourself? Izuku looked up from where he was staring down at his lap. This time, the both of them were left with no supervision. However, Izuku was bound to the chair this time, but instead of being held down by multiple cuffs and straps, he had a simple strap across his chest, like a seatbelt, and two iron cuffs binding him to the chair. His arms weren't cuffed, and he could easily get out of this. This meant the league trusted him more. This was good. It would be easier to break out. A small ball of dejection pooled on the bottom of his gut, but he ignored it. It didn't matter that he had literally just spilled his and Kacchan's dirty laundry to a group of villains who could easily use it to destroy Kacchan's future. What was he thinking? He was too emotional sometimes. He realized he was thinking too much and looked up to see the unfriendly face of Kacchan. What do you mean, Kacchan? He asked softly. Don't pull that Kacchan crap on me, you bastard, he snapped, smirking when Izuku flinched. I want to know why you're sucking up to the villains. Izuku felt a spark of defensiveness. I'm not sucking up to them, he snapped. Kacchan didn't expect him to snap back, based on the brief look of shock that he had passed across his face. But before it was replaced with a scowl. Yes, you are. You fucking offered to be that vampire's bitch's friend. She's a villain, not to mention the fact that you've been nice to them. They are villains, he shouted. They're still people, Kacchan, Izuku yelled back. So, they're evil and need to rot in hell, he growled. No, they don't, Izuku snapped. They're people who are hurting because of people in their life failed them. Why should I care? Bakugo seemed genuinely confused, not that he showed it on his face. It's not my problem. I became a hero to beat the shit out of villains, not to act as some psychotherapist. Izuku let out a small growl, which actually caught Bakugo off guard. Izuku never got angry. Not really. Sure, he had seemed angry at the sports festival when fighting Todoroki, but that was more annoyance than anything, and came from a place of classic Deku wanting to help people. So no, Izuku never got angry. He was the general thought people had when meeting him. Heck, people who had known him since he was a child. Not like the list was that long, though. He was nothing more than a bundle of sunshine. They're not technically wrong, but it is foolish to assume one is incapable of an emotion, because genuinely happy or not, they're humans, capable of murder if they so desired. This, however, is not something most people think about. How can you say something like that? Oh right, you're heartless, Izuku snapped. What did you just fucking say to me? Bakugo snarled. Izuku had a frown on his face. You heard me, he said. Izuku had a short fuse at the moment. Between the kidnapping, essentially revealing his childhood in front of strangers, and the breakdown that followed, that was to be expected. You don't care about anyone but yourself. Maybe you somewhat care for our class. That's a big maybe. You can't even remember their names. You call them degrading insults instead. You bullied me for something I couldn't control. You left scars on me. You told me to jump off a roof, he screamed. All because of your damn superiority complex. Izuku almost never swore. He never yelled like this. He never got angry. He never yelled at Katsuki. It was like he was releasing all of his anger he had built up over the years. However, he had just touched the sore spot of Bakugo's, and that was his mistake. Shut up, Bakugo screamed. Shut the fuck up, you useless Deku. You don't know anything. You're a coward and a traitor. His anger and glycerin sweat were becoming too much for his restraints. The restraints broke, and he launched at for Izuku. Shigaraki Tomura was currently in his room playing on his Switch. It was an old game console, sure, but Sensei once owned it, and it was fun to play on. So Tomura often found himself playing with it when he had the time. He had left Izuku and Bakugo alone as a test to see if they would try and escape or not. While he did think Izuku wouldn't leave after Izuku had pretty much spilled his entire backstory for the league to see, Shigaraki still didn't trust Bakugo as far as he could throw him. At first, Shigaraki thought of the blonde brat as nothing more than a brat. But once they could draw to their course, one they could see. All of those feelings had vanished when Izuku had spilled his and Bakugo's past. The brat had nothing more than an egoistic bully, a prime example of what was wrong in today's society. Why someone like him had managed to get in top school, Shigaraki had no idea. Actually, no, he knew exactly why. Because, just like every other hero school, UA was corrupt. They didn't care about their students, and only their potential and quirks. They didn't care about their personalities or wants. All they cared about was making more children soldiers for the corrupt hero society. The only reason that the League had murdered the blonde-haired bastard on the spot was because it would make them look worse. UA would spin it like they had killed the brat for no reason and refused to ignore the corruption in their society and school. They would pin it all over the villains. When Izuku had spilled the beans about his past, Shigaraki felt overwhelming rage and a swell of protectiveness. He didn't know why or how, but Bakugo reminded him of someone who made him itch, which meant Shigaraki hated them and wanted to destroy them, like most things. Funnily enough, after his conversation with Izuku at the mall, he had been less prone to destroying things in a fit. Whenever he reached to destroy something in a fit of anger, Izuku's words kept coming back to him. "What do you want, Shigaraki?" No one had ever said that to him before, at least not in that way. When Tomura heard those voices, it was normally from Kurogiri, a resigned sigh, and then that question. Normally, it was a new video game. When he had first met the brat, he had passed an urge to destroy him and soothe the itch. However, once he had that fateful encounter with Izuku at the mall, the itch stopped. In fact, when Shigaraki thought of Izuku, anything that was making him itch had stopped. Tomura didn't know what that meant. He suddenly heard loud banging and shouting from the room Bakugo and Izuku were in. He sighed, disappointed. He convinced himself he was disappointed because he had spent so much time and resources to find and kidnap the two, and how rude they were by breaking out, and not that he was disappointed that Izuku wanted to leave them. He opened the door, expecting to see the two breaking their way out, and was instead faced with an unpleasant sight of Baku beating a trembling Midori with his bare fists. How did he get out of his restraints, and popping the occasional explosion to his victim, smirking victoriously at the flinching the other did when he let loose an explosion. Everything went red. Shigaraki snarled and flung himself at Bakugo, moving too fast for the boy to even notice him, not like the boy had even seen him enter the room anyway. He grabbed Bakugo and flung him into the wall. He was wearing gloves that covered one pinky finger, and checked on the state of Izuku. It wasn't pretty. The boy's shirt had a multitude of rips and burn marks, but his back was the worst part. It was covered in first marks and first-degree burns, and his right eye was a gigantic burn mark covering up almost the whole right side of his face. It wasn't serious, thank God, but it still looked bad. Shigaraki hadn't even noticed when the other teammates had entered the room. Mr. Compress had already sorted Bakugo away, thankfully. Spinner and Magna ran over to the green-haired boy, helping him up. His eyes were screwed shut tightly, like he was expecting more blows. Magna had taken the boy in her arms and rushed him to one of the small couches they had in the lounge. Put cold water on his burns, he heard Spinner shout. He zoned out of there. Everything was nothing more than a background static. He was angry. Angry at the damn blonde brat. Angry at the league members for not noticing sooner. Angry at himself for not noticing sooner. He just sat there, head in his hands and zoomed out. Completely obvious to the world around him he was that as he continued to self-deprecate. He was like that for a while, hours maybe. He snapped out of his trance by Toga, of all things. She was shaking his back and forth, rigorously, shouting, Tomura, Tomura, Tomura! What? He snapped. I'm back to Earth, congratulations. Now go away. She pouted. Don't be like that. I know Zeus hurt and all. Her face darkened momentarily at that. But that gives you no right to be such a meanie, he let out a growl. What do you want? I want to know if you had a crush, she responded back in her peppy mood. He was caught off guard by that. What? Your scent indicated that you had a crush. A thoughtful look crossed her face. Izuku had the same scent. She seemed to put the puzzle pieces together. By the way, her face lit up. She grinned and giggled madly. He squinted her eyes at her. What are you happy about? He asked suspiciously. She grinned. You and Zuko have a crush on each other, she responded. And instead of snapping, screaming, or vehemently denying it, his mind came to a halt. Oh, he had a crush. That's why he suddenly stopped itching whenever he thought about Izuku. That's why he decided to kidnap him along with Bakugo. That's why he was so angry when he found out all the suffering Izuku had been through. How easy for him to catch a crush if he had fallen in love with someone that he had hated not a week ago. It was pathetic. Toga giggled and clapped happily when she saw Tomura's blue screen. It's true, she exclaimed. Ooh, you two would be so cute together. You should talk to him. You should talk to him, tell him how you feel, or you could ask me to pretty him up. I'd be happy to. As if to demonstrate, she pulled out a sharp knife. He finally snapped out of his internal panic. No, he snapped. Don't. She put the knife away, still grinning. Okay, I won't. Her smile turned devious. If you confess to Izuku, I know he has a crush on you. The scent is so similar, he growled. Go away. This time, she actually left, cackling as she left. He put his face in his hands. What the hell was he going to do? What the hell was he going to tell Sensei? When Tomura walked into the room where Izuku was currently being tended to, with father resting on his face again, he found Dabi looming over Izuku. He felt a spark of jealousy. He let out a growl to let the man know he was there and that he wasn't happy. Dabi looked up unimpressed. Calm down, Krusty. Mug told me to look after him as they went to get some more first aid supplies. He shrugged. Spinner is surprisingly good with medical tools. Tomura narrowed his eyes. Leave, he snapped. Dabi held up his hands. Fine. You gotta watch over him, though, or else Mug will have my head and yours. And with that, he exited the room. Shigaraki shot him one last glare as he left, staring at the door for a couple of more minutes, until finally turning his attention to Izuku. He looked more stable than he was when they found him. Before he was a shivering mess. Now he was sleeping peacefully. His shirt was off, with his torso covered in bandages instead. Now that Tomura knew exactly what his feelings were at this moment, it was a lot more difficult to look or be in the same room as Izuku without panicking, but it also made Tomura want to be with him at all times. Why did feelings have to be so damn complicated? There was a groaning beside him, and he looked over to see Izuku shifting. Wearily, he blinked his eyes open, hissing in pain at the sudden light in his eyes. Shigaraki? He managed to get out. You're awake. Shigaraki was more so saying it for himself than Izuku, as if to convince himself that Izuku was okay. What happened? Izuku asked. The damn Bakugo brat attacked you. You passed out, I think. Shigaraki growled at the mention or thought of that kid. That brat filled him with more rage than he ever thought possible. He had reached up and began to scratch at his neck, not even wincing when the day-old scraps began to open and bleed, even though his nerves were screaming at him to stop. A hand grabbed his wrist and yanked it away from his neck, and Shigaraki almost dusted it on the spot before seeing it belonged to Izuku. Stop that. It was quiet but no less firm. Slowly, Shigaraki lowered his other hand from his neck and Izuku let go of his wrist. A comfortable silence descended upon the two. Izuku was staring up at the ceiling blankly, while Shigaraki, who was bored out of his mind, was mostly content with staying there. He briefly wondered why Spinner and Magne were taking so long to get back with the supplies, then remembered they were almost out of medical supplies due to his crouching habit and his gunshot wound from the USJ, along with his knife wound from Stain. Shigaraki assumed they had used the last of it on Izuku. They also probably had to obscure themselves even more now that they were wanted criminals. Even if the heroes and police didn't know who Spinner was yet, they could still recognize him due to his unique mutation quirk and iconic purple hair. They would probably be willing to risk arresting an innocent citizen, since they would definitely get away with it. Did you think about what I said to them all? About you wanted? Izuku asked suddenly. And God, how could he not think about it? That had been replaying in his head for days on end. Even when playing his video games, that would still be lingering in the very back of his mind. It annoyed him, but not as much as the thought it would have. Probably because of his crush. Yes, is all he said. Do you know now? He asked. No. He thought about it constantly. Sometimes even looked for an answer, but he never got one. All his life he had destroyed because he wanted, because he could. So to think about an actual reason, it was frustrating. Oh, he sat in the room for quiet again. When Shigaraki heard soft snores, he looked back at Izuku and saw that he was asleep. Spinner and Maga had just burst into the room, carrying a brand new first aid kit with them. They both looked confused when they saw Shigaraki instead of Dabi watching Izuku. Where's Dabi? Magna asked. Shigaraki shrugged. How should I know? As he saw them, Sai and Magna muttered, I swear, if Dabi left him by himself before I came here. He stood up and walked out of the room, letting them continue to care for Izuku. Eventually, Izuku was allowed to get up and walk around soon enough, but Spinner had said he wasn't allowed to lay down on his back, have any sort of bad posture, so he didn't stretch his wounds, and had to be under constant supervision. The last part wasn't new, though. Izuku was sitting on one of the stools bar, listening to Mr. Compress tell them both some old folk tale stories. Mr. Compress was very long-winded and could talk for hours on end, if you let him. Izuku was listening intently, wearing a new shirt since the old one was completely burned the backside. It was definitely one that Kurogiri had got him from the store, totally a spare. Totally. Shigaraki definitely didn't lend Izuku one of his shirts and was currently blushing slightly because behind father as he saw Izuku wear it. Definitely not. Dabi, I see that smirk. You're not being sneaky, I swear to. Speaking of, are we going to address the elephant in the room? Dabi cut in, interrupting Tomar's plan to wring the bastard's neck. Ah, yes. We should do that, shouldn't we? Mr. Compress asked with pathetically. He took out a small marble and threw it in the middle of the room. Everyone backed up and took fighting stance while Shigaraki got in front of Izuku. Mr. Compress snapped his fingers and Bakugo came out. Out of the corner of his eyes, he saw Izuku flinch. Izuku did not want to be here right now. He didn't want to be anywhere near Bakugo after having been given a brutal beatdown by the boy, physically and emotionally. Turns out Bakugo was still as great as insult as ever. Bakugo, as always, came out screaming, "Motherfuckers, what the hell did you do?" "Shut up," Shigaraki snapped. "Fuck you," Bakugo screamed and launched for Shigaraki. "Where's Deku, that traitorous bastard?" He was cut off by Magma using magnetism to pull him back, slamming into the wall. "We aren't here to recruit you anymore," Shigaraki stated coldly. "I was going to let you live since that will give people the wrong idea about our case, but now I'm starting to wonder if you actually deserve that mercy." "Like hell you can kill me." Knock, knock, knock. Hello? "I got pizza delivery," a male voice said. Izuku looked around the room and managed to see the police's tense and worried expression. He was wondering why they looked so apprehensive when it clicked. They didn't order any pizza. Smash! All Might burst through the wall behind Spinner, knocking him to the ground. "What the? Kurogiri!" Shigaraki shouted. "Gate!" Kamino Woods jumped down. Imperative binding. Less queer chain prison. Oh my god. 3 branches were wrapped around every individual member of the league. Shigaraki was yanked down out of the way, and All Might's smile got a little bit wider as he saw Izuku. Normally, Izuku would feel ecstatic and honored, but now he just felt sick. He had done a lot of thinking in this time with the league. Every conversation, every moment he spent with them, every time he was left alone to stew in his own thoughts, he had spent a lot of time analyzing the hero and villain world. Dissecting his own life, thinking about his experiences and mistreatment at the hands of Aldera. He thought about his quirk, Awful One, and where he would be if he never got it. He thought about All Might, his mentor and father figure, and how he had crushed Izuku's dreams without remorse. Then went ahead and offered Izuku his quirk like nothing happened. "Young Midoriya!" All Might's voice cut through his thoughts. He put a hand on Izuku's shoulder and looked at Bakugo. "You two must have been scared, but you stayed strong." His smile turned apologetic. "I'm sorry. You're both safe now, you two." He looked at Izuku. The smile turned stained when he saw the burn marks left by Bakugo. The unsaid question of, "Did they do this to you?" was between them. Izuku opened his mouth to nod, but Bakugo interrupted him. "What? I wasn't scared, not even close," he denied vehemently. All Might chuckled slightly at that. Izuku noticed Pro Hero, Gran Torino, and X showed. "When did they get here?" and blinked. Shigaraki growled in frustration. "After I went through all this trouble preparing this, the final boss goes and shows up at my doorstep." He paused for a moment. "Kurogiri, wrap over as many as you can." All Might's smile turned sardonic. "The Nomu, right?" A pause. "What are you waiting for, damn it?" Shigaraki snapped. Izuku could see the dread and guilt coming from Kurogiri. "I'm sorry, Tomura." Shigaraki. "The Nomus were supposed to be the fixed location, but they're gone." "Huh? It seems you have to learn a lot, Tomura Shigaraki." All Might put his other hand on Bakugo's shoulder as well. "Your little league underestimated all of us. The souls of these 2 young men. The police diligent investigations. Our righteous fury." All Might seemed to stand even straighter, puffing his chest out. "Enough is enough. Your game has to come to an end, Tomura Shigaraki." Izuku felt hollow. He didn't want to leave. Lilik had treated him with so much more kindness than anyone had in 10 years. As he saw Shigaraki struggle to stand up while bound, he knew what would happen. They would be captured. Bakugo would throw accusations of Izuku being the traitor, and Izuku would be lucky if that happened. If all that happened was he was thrown out of UA and was forced to give All Might's quirk back. Kurogiri! Shigaraki shouted before freezing when he saw Kurogiri drop unconscious. Izuku swore he had seen a tiny red ribbon pass through Kurogiri's body. What just happened? I couldn't see anything. Did they kill him? Magna panicked. Izuku recognized that red sting of fabric he had briefly seen pierce through Kurogiri. It was Akshot's special moves. Ninpo, 1,000 sheet pierced. Weren't you listening earlier? You'd all be better if you take us seriously. He looked at Magna. Kenji Hishi. He looked at Mr. Compress. Atsuri Sako. He looked at Spinner. Shiushi Iguchi. I can't, I'm sorry. His eyes were now on Himiko Toga, twice. Jin, I'm not gonna even read this. I can't. Booba, no. Grantarina nodded. Though they had a little time, the police worked gently to discover your true identities. Don't you understand? There was nowhere left for any of you to run. He turned to Shigaraki. So, Shigaraki, one question. Where's your boss hiding? Shigaraki was quiet. For a long time, everyone could see his unease and nervousness, and Izuku restrained his urge to cry, feeling his eyes beginning to water. Then, unexpectedly, the nervousness and unease turned into unrestrained raw hatred. No, he growled. This is not over yet. He shook, whether from anger or fear. Izuku couldn't say. Just you wait, the game is still mine. You tell us where he is right now, All Might demanded. Go away, disappear, Shigaraki said quietly, his voice shaking from unbuilded rage. Shigaraki, All Might warned. This is all your fault. I hate you. Izuku believed that. He actually flinched from the unchecked rage and hatred in Shigaraki's eyes and voice. Black sludge suddenly exploded out of thin air, Numa coming through it. Damn it, Akshot! Stop Kurogiri! He's still unconscious. This isn't his doing, Akshot responded. Izuku felt sick as he felt the black sludge crawled up his throat and forced its way out, obscuring his vision. Young Midoriya, Bakugo. Bakugo was sticking too? Izuku wondered. Izuku reappeared in a barren wasteland, coughing and shaking violently. Oh, wait, no, there were buildings. Most of them were broken by something. Something powerful, Izuku thought as he looked at the debris, his fear beginning to creep through his veins, his muscles tensed. Oh, come now, none of that. Where's that spirit that has interrupted my dear Tomura so much? A voice behind him said. Izuku slowly looked around, his fear obvious in his face, when he saw a masked villain behind him, considering that said villain had just let out a mirthful-filled laugh. Don't worry, child, your secret is safe with me. It'll be much more amusing later, the super villain assured, softly patting the top of Izuku's curls. That's when Izuku saw Bakugo appear from the sledge. He coughed violently. Damn it, he coughed again. What the hell? My apologies, Bakugo. The supervillain didn't sound sorry at all. Then the rest of the League members showed up, coming out of the black sludge like the Nomu and Bakugo, and probably like Izuku did. They were gagging and coughing, much like him and Bakugo. That was so gross, Toga complained, reaching. Shigaraki was also there, as to be expected, and looked up to the masked man. Sensei, he said quietly. This man was Shigaraki's sensei? Izuku guessed it made sense. You had to have a lot of power in order for Shigaraki to even consider listening to you and deal with his destructive quirk. Izuku suddenly noticed Kurogiri and Dabi, both unconscious. He felt a pang of worry for them. Being unconscious and wrapped in such a disturbing way could not be good for them. So you failed again, Tomura, Shigaraki-sensei said, walking towards them. But you must not be discouraged. You'll try again. That's why I brought your associates back with you. He glanced at Izuku. Even this child, because he decided he was an important piece for you. He looked back at Bakugo. This one too. You got him, fair and square after all. He held his hand out to Shigaraki. Start over, as many times as it takes. I am here to provide you with all the help. This is for you. The supervillain looked up as he said. The supervillain looked up suddenly. Ah, he said, there you are. Izuku looked over where the supervillain was looking and saw a symbol of peace flying towards them. All Might threw a punch at the villain, who proceeded to block it. However, the force of the punch was almost too much for everyone who would hold their ground. I'll have you return my student, All For One. That's All For One? Izuku felt panic quickly re-enter his system, and he began to shake. His eyes round and saucer. He stumbled and started to get blown away before a hand wrapped around his own. Bakugo's. Izuku flinched, and Bakugo had the density to look slightly guilty. Have you come to kill me a second time, All Might? The All For One mocked. All For One ended up being able to deflect the punch, which threw everyone off balance, causing Bakugo to let go of Izuku's wrist and get thrown back as well. Izuku put his hands over his ears. The boom that came from the crash that All Might had got from being punched, too much for him. After what seemed like hours, he finally got up again, only for another punch to throw him off balance again. This time he hit his head, letting out a slight hiss of pain. He touched the back of it. Thankfully, nothing was bleeding. His burn marks on his back were screaming at him, however, and he thinks some of them were ripped open, feeling fresh blood run down his back and stain Shigaraki's shirt. Don't worry, All For One assured as Izuku shakily stood up. Izuku's nerves were screaming at him, and it was only after years of bullying and assault that Izuku wasn't at the ground writhing in pain. Tomura, get off the battlefield and take the children with you, Kurogiri. All For One's figures turned into sharp-pointed weapons that proceeded to stab the addressed rapper, whose body shook violently before a portal opened beside him. Wrap them away. Careful, Magno warned. One of the heroes messed with him. He's unconscious. I'm not sure what's going on, but if you can't teleport, why don't you get us out of here? My rap power is still new, Magna, Of One explained in considering tone, as thought he was speaking to a child. Given that he was 200 years old, though, Magno was probably a toddler in comparison to him. There is much I need to learn about. Its distance is limited, and while he can teleport to specific coordinates, I can only transport people to and from my location, or with focus, to or from someone I'm very familiar with. That's it. It is easier for Kurogiri to do it. He turned to Shigaraki. Leave this place, Tomura. But what about you? Shigaraki asked, and that made Izuku realize All For One was much more than a mentor to Tomura. He was a father figure, much like All Might was one for Izuku. You're not thinking, Tomura. All For One used another quirk to lift himself into the air as All Might flew towards him again. There remains much room for you to grow. You're mine, All Might shouted, throwing yet another punch. Shigaraki was silent. Then, Forget Bakugo, he said, then whirled around to point towards Izuku. He comes with us. All Might turned away from the fight with All For One to look at Izuku. Young Midoriya! He flew himself towards Izuku, stepping in front of him protectively, holding up his fists. Surprisingly, All For One didn't stop him. But why? Was he planning something? League were all preparing to rush at All Might, some even going at him from behind to get Izuku back. All Might was trying to get him back to Yae, but he realized, I don't want to go back to Yae. I want to stay with them. Bakugo was watching them with wide eyes, looking back and forth, seemingly tried to bait whether or not he should help All Might or just watch the fight go down. Suddenly there was a loud crash. Shocked, Izuku saw Ida, Todoroki, Yaoyorozu, and Kirishima. Todoroki had created a huge ice slab reaching up into the sky as they ran up to it. They seemed to be rolling themselves up the ice slab with Ida's Recipro boost. Kirishima turned to them. Come on! He held his hands out for them both to grab. Bakugo didn't hesitate, but Izuku did. Ever since the League took him, they had been kinder and more understanding to him than anyone else had ever been. Even his friends at UA didn't fully understand. They saw his and Bakugo's relationship as rivals, not a bullying victim. They didn't seem to understand him. They called him modern creepy. They called his modern creepy, like everyone else in his life had. And Izuku had more than once had the creeping thought of how they would treat him if he was still quirkless. Maybe they would treat him like his old bullies. Maybe they would ignore his existence. Maybe they would pity him. Maybe they would deem him too fresh and constantly coddle him. In fact, would he even be in UA in the first place if he didn't have One For All? Would he even be friends with them if he didn't have One For All? The entrance exams were deliberately trailed to people with strong, flashy quirks, more physical abilities. A quirkless kid could die in an exam like that. Hell, a kid with a quirk like Shinso Hagakuri's quirk could die in an exam like that. Meeting his old bullies and seeing how they would treat him if he had a strong quirk had resurfaced a lot of old insecurities. Could he really look at his friends now and say with confidence that they would care about him even if he didn't have a quirk? He didn't know, and that's why he hesitated. Bakugo used his explosions to pro himself to his friends and grabbed a hold of Kirishima's hand, but Izuku hesitated, and his friends went by so fast they quickly flew out of sight, missing their chance. Izuku was still at the mercy of the League. Not that he minded at all. Izuku grabbed and tugged All Might's arm. Get out of the way, he said, voice monotone, face blank. All Might's shocked face whipped around to face him. Let them come to me. My boy, are you crazy? All Might exclaimed. Izuku stared at him blankly. Let me go to them, he demanded. No, All Might refused. I know what plan you're thinking up right now, but I won't allow it. Ignoring him, Izuku walked out from behind the symbol of peace, stepping in front of him, eyes of the villains. It's a danger. All Might grabbed his arm. It's too dangerous. Stop. Silence. The villains looked slightly confused. Did you know? Izuku began, his voice eerie monotone. The quirkless statistics get lower and lower every year. Ahmed looked at him, confused and panicked. My boy, what does it have to do with anything? Get back behind me. He tried to pull Izuku behind him, but Izuku used full calling to break his arm out of All Might's iron grip. Every year, quirkless unemployment rates go up, he said. Most don't even reach their adult years. The police, the people who are supposed to protect us, even discriminate against quirks. They looked at All Might extendedly, expecting him to catch on. Sadly, he didn't. He just looked extremely confused. So, no, All Might. I couldn't be more realistic in your sense of the world. Realistic for me meant ending up on the streets, failing, failing victim to hate crimes, or staying with my mom, jobless. I thought you would understand that better than anyone. All Might finally seemed to catch on, because his face paled. My boy, don't, Izuku snapped. The villains, Sanstabi and Kurogiri, one was compressed by Mr. Compressed. The other, unconscious, looked interested and confused now. Even All For One indulged an interested aura. I thought we would understand. You were quirkless once after all, either times have changed, and you never thought to keep an eye out on the quirkless. He narrowed his eyes. You just forget all about quirkless population in general. All Might sputtered. Izuku tilted his head. You thought I couldn't be a hero, like everyone else in my life said. You didn't know anything about my determination, my talents, or my personality. You just saw the labor the quirk doctor slapped on me when I was 4 and never bothered to look past it. Just like everyone else in my life. He took a shaky breath. He also never gave Bakugo consequences for attacking me. Sure, it was a battle trial, which was a bad idea in the first place. You should have had us getting used to our hero gear before even thinking about that. But you didn't care that he had sent me into the infirmary. You didn't care that he had hurt me, just like everyone else in my life. He glared. You encouraged me to push my limits, to hurt myself. You gave me praises for it, and for helping me to see that I was hurting myself. I mangled my hand because you never told me how to hold back. You didn't even teach me how to use it. You just gave me a quirk and told me to use it. Even after the entrance exam, you didn't do anything to help me. It took going to Gran Torino to figure out how to control my power. You hurt me during the final exams. You almost impaled me. You left a scar on me. Did you know that? Judging by his mentor's sudden paleness, he didn't. You could have killed me, maimed me. You hurt me a lot, even when I begged you to stop. But you didn't. Just like everyone else in my life. Even when you said I could be a hero, you added on with my quirk. You didn't change your answer to my question. I asked you, can a quirkless person become a hero? You said no. Your answer didn't change. You still thought I couldn't do it, so you gave me your quirk. So let me ask you the question again, All Might. Izuku looked at him directly in the eyes. Can a quirkless person be a hero? All Might was stunned. His trademark smile gone, and that was enough for an answer for Izuku. He turned his gaze downwards. He took one step back. Izuku turned around sharply and ran towards the portal, throwing himself and not looking back. He fell through the portal and hit rough steel ground harshly, allowing the tears he held back for so long to finally flow. God. Yagito Shirino was lost for what to do. His student had left him. Izuku Midoriya had left them. The villains, though confused, looked overjoyed. Young Midoriya had willingly gone with them. Shogaki Tomura in particular looked excited or happy with this turn of events. It was disgusting. A sharp cackle echoed from behind him, which Toshirino turned around and threw himself at the villain, aiming another punch square to his life support mask. What have you done to him? He screamed, anger building as one cackled louder and harder. Nothing. I didn't speak to him the whole time he was with Tomura. Toshirino could almost see the villain's smug grin. How does it feel to be the final straw that pushes Midoriya Izuku away from the side of the heroes? I did nothing. He hesitated, thinking back to the Izuku's worlds. And now he had crushed that boy's dreams. Without a second thought, desperate to contain his secret and leaving the boy on the roof alone. Oh, really? Did you know? You're perfectly innocent throughout this whole transaction despite your former student's accusations. He laughed, much lighter this time, but no less mirth-filled. He flung Toshirina on the ground. You know, these turn of events are perfect. All for one for all. Tomura and Izuku. It's lovely. The two quirks are on the same side after the pointless battle that you and your predecessors have unnecessarily dragged on throughout the span of 200 years. Toshirino, another voice called out, and said man looked up to see Gran Torino. He looked around the battlefield, only to see that the League had left. The gate was closed. What happened? Where's your successor? As Izuku was being held by the League members, comforted through his crying, he felt warmth. He wasn't just crying because of sad and pain. He was crying tears of relief because he was home.